This is Kurt Ballou from Converge, and you're listening to The New Scene.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The New Scene. This is Keith.
And Tommy.
And we're back with another brand new episode. Tommy, I'm so happy to be able to do the original intro with you. Don't you love it?
I miss it a lot, I'll be honest. I really do miss this. Sitting in my basement, talking to you about music. I miss this a lot. I do.
Well, we're back. And listen, if you're a newer listener to the show, Tommy is co-founder of the show, and he was my original co-host for the first 111 episodes of the show. And we had to bring him back because we have a very special episode for you. We have the one, the only, Stephen Brodsky of Cave In and Mutoid Man. Mutoid Man have an excellent new LP that just came out. It's called Mutants. It's great. He's great. We cover everything. The origins of Mutoid Man, recording the new record, a whole bunch of Cave-In stuff, everything. Tommy, it's good to have you back for this episode because, you know, we were trying to get Cave-In on the first year of the show, I think.
100%. They were get, because for both of us, it was Cave-In was the band that got us into hardcore.
Oh, for you too.
For me, I think the big thing was I got into punk rock and crust first, but my earliest memory of Cave-In was I heard them. Not actually heard, I didn't see them live. I was at a Dillinger Escape Plan show with Anthony in 1997, 1998 at an auto body place in Warminster. And they were playing songs in between bands. And I literally had to run up to the guy and I'm like, what are you playing right now? And he was like, it's Crossbear from Cave-In. And I was like, I need to go look this up immediately. I need to find out this band. It was the perfect mesh of heavy and melodic, and just it was everything I was looking for in music at that time, and it resonated so heavy with me. I just loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the aesthetic. I loved the music. I loved just the way they looked. They didn't look like hardcore guys. Like when I saw them live, I was like, oh shit, they look like normal dudes.
Yeah.
They don't look like tough guys. It's not like seeing Marauder. It's like fucking like regular dudes. Like it was, that to me was like, oh, this is attainable. This is really fucking cool. I love that. I love that part of them.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, they were half the reason I got into hardcore in this greater world of music in the first place. I have two distinct memories of Cave-In. Number one, hearing Programmed Behind for the first time. I was like, oh, I don't know if I can get into this music. There's too much screaming. It's too heavy. I don't know. And I was in Mike Shaw's car, Mike Shaw of This Day Forward. We were driving somewhere and I was in the back seat and Programmed Behind came on, the Cave-In song from Beyond Hypothermia. And, you know, there's like that melodic part at the end. It's kind of that mid to late 90s emo sounding stuff that was going on. And I was like, hey, I really like this. Maybe I could like this after all. And I think I heard Beyond Hypothermia and Until Your Heart Stops. I think I got them together, but I'll never forget hearing Juggernaut for the first time, where that melodic part right before it goes into the breakdowns. Oh my God. I still get goosebumps to this day when I hear it.
There's a really good thing. If you have nice headphones, listen to Juggernaut, and right before the breakdown comes in, there is a slight bell in the left-hand ear. Like in your left ear, it literally just goes ting. It's amazing. I literally had to call Vadim one time and be like, is that real? Like, is that a thing? Am I imagining this? And he's like, no, I can hear that too. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I'm not going insane. We're good.
And, you know, Mutoid Man, another great band. I was really excited when Mutoid Man broke onto the scene because, you know, Steve was dipping his hand back into heavier music, and that was really exciting for me. And they're doing great things. And look, you're going to hear all about it. That conversation is coming up shortly. But first, here's how you can support The New Scene. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at New Scene Pod. Shirts. We have shirts available for sale at Death Wish Inc. There's a long sleeve option. There's short sleeve options. Pick up a shirt. It's a great way to support the show. Reviews. Give us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Hit that 5-star button if you haven't done it yet. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, and you can leave feedback on Spotify. And Tommy, I have a new review here. Are you ready for this?
Let's go.
All right. This is from Kyle G85. He says, great guests, amazing host, 5 stars. Keith has a very consistent and enjoyable tempo and tone. I learned so many new things each episode. The interview with Kat from FOM was epic. Keep it up, Keith. Now, Tommy, I know this review is focused on me because you've been absent from the scene for a while, but would you agree that I have a very consistent and enjoyable tempo and tone?
Yeah, it's consistent. Keith is robotic when it comes to this stuff. He sent me the unedited version of the interview with Caven, and I was like, oh, when he asks a question and he even stumbles a little bit, like hesitates on a word or does anything, he repeats the entire thing so that when you get a product at the end, it is 100% perfect. Like, he legitimately cares about every single detail about this podcast, and I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I'm a perfectionist to detrimental degrees, and that's a little bit behind the scenes for you there, people. I stumble when I ask questions a lot, but I edit them perfectly to deliver them to you. So, Kyle, thanks so much for the review. Keep them coming, everybody. It really helps us out in the podcast rankings. Also, don't forget to support Iodine Recordings. Stretch Armstrong, A Revolution Transmission is available on vinyl for the first time in 20 years. There's a few mint green LPs left to pre-order as I record this, so make sure you grab one before they're gone in the Iodine store. 6 going on 7 have joined the Iodine Recordings family. You can stream Method Actor and New Faith in Loss from their New Faith in Loss 7-inch. 6 going on 7 features Josh English, who I've had on the podcast. And you know what? I listened to Method Actor again today. Man, this band is so good. I forgot how good they were. Check it out if you're into the emo-infused indie rock type sound. It's really, really good. The Iron Roses are returning to Europe this December with Shoreline. Those dates kick off December 3rd in Germany. And my band, The Darling Fire, has 2 gigs coming up in August. Saturday, August 19th at Amityville Music Hall, and Sunday, August 20th in Philadelphia at Kung Fu Necktie. Advance tickets are available in my bio. Sign up for the Iodine email list. You'll find out about everything first. For more information, head to the Iodine Instagram at Iodine Recordings or to the Iodine website at iodinerecordings.com. Also, don't forget to support this month's sponsor, New Morality Zine. That's right, New Morality Zine is back. They are our sponsor for the month of August. NMZ is a Midwest-based zine and independent record label specializing in hardcore, post-hardcore, and alternative music. And here's what's going down. Pre-orders are up for Curse the Knife's There's a Place I Can Rest, and that's out September 8th. Vinyl and merch bundles are available in the NMZ web store. The cassette repress of Wish You Were Here by Demo Division is available now. That's limited to 50 tapes, so pick one up before they're gone. Stateside has tour dates this fall with Montclair to support their release. It's What We Do. That just came out July 30th on NMZ. And those tour dates kick off September 15th in San Diego. There's a New Morality gig at Beat Kitchen in Chicago on September 13th. That features Restraining Order, Gum, and some other great bands. Check it out if you're in Chicago. Also, get 10% off any order in the NMZ web store with the code NewScenePod. For more information, head to the New Morality Zine Instagram at New Morality Zine or head to their website at newmoralityzine.com. Okay, so Tommy, let's talk music recommendations. What have you got? Lay it on us.
The entire new Jerome's Dream is unbelievable. It is incredible front to back. Like, they are everything I like about that heavy emotive music. It's just it's so smartly done and so well thought out, and just I really, really enjoy it. The other thing, I just got this like a day ago. The new Kubla Khan track, it's called Theory of Mind. If you are into super, super heavy, like breakdown kind of stuff, like Knock Loose, that kind of thing, this is for you. Go lift weights and go listen to the new Kubla Khan track, Theory of Mind. It is absolutely brutal. I'm convinced they use like bridge cables instead of strings. It is so fucking heavy. It's like what holds up the Verrazano Bridge. It's like that. That's what they fucking put on their guitars and their bass. It is unreal. It's so heavy. It's so good. And their message is about kind of self-reliance and just being kind of forthright and being truthful and being about what is right. And I enjoy their music. I really, really, really like what they do. Their energy on stage is phenomenal. I've only seen them once, but the stuff I see on YouTube is unbelievable. So those are my two recommendations. The last thing I would say, I don't know if it's still happening, but if Braid is still on tour and you can see them, go see them. I saw them in Lancaster. They were unbelievable. They were so good. Braid was one of those bands that I knew the whole album front to back for Frame and Canvas, and it was perfection. And then they played for another 40 minutes after that. They played the whole album and they played for almost another hour. It was really great.
You actually went to see them recently.
Yeah, I went with Rich middle of July, I think. It was.
See, I had no idea what you were up to. And look, I need to ask you more questions about that because Tommy is up to things that I have no idea about. And you know what? I got to ask him about it. But here's what I'm listening to. I'm still on a ambient kick. I was listening to some Hammock today. I was listening to some Antent. I'm still listening to Helios. When I talked to Mike from Page 99, we started talking about Respire. And I remembered how much I like them. So I've been listening to them again as well. You remember them, Tommy. We had them on the show when you were still here.
Dude, excellent band. They have one of the best live videos on YouTube. They have a fest up in Canada somewhere where it has, the word is friends in it. New
Friends Fest.
There it is. Thank you. That performance from New Friends Fest it's 40 minutes of just absolute demolition. Like, they are so good and so tight live. And the stuff that you think like, oh, like they might not be able to pull this off live. They have two horn players. They have a violin player. They have a viola player. They have a cello player. Like this, it all comes through. The stuff you hear on the recording comes through live. And it's that same type of emotion and that same type of heartfelt, really just, it's not even post rock. What do you call that? Like
they call it post everything.
Post everything. There you go. I was going to say the guy from Respire had a name for it. Like, but it's so good and it's so raw. And that's what I love about music. That's the thing that like they're a great band. And on top of that, they seem like really nice people that are they have their hearts in the right place. And they're honestly really, really nice people.
Well, listen, check back in with me and Tommy in segment 3. We're going to catch up. I'm going to find out what Tommy's been up to. We're going to get to the bottom of all of it. But right now, we are going to speak to Stephen Brodsky of Mutoid Man and Caven. Enjoy. All right. We are here now with Stephen Brodsky. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Keith.
Yes, Steve, it's great to have you here. You know, you've done a whole lot throughout your life in music and otherwise. We've got a new Mutoid Man, Mutants, coming later this month in July. You've had an incredible career with Caven. You've actually managed to be in like pretty much all my favorite bands, Steve, which is great. And you know what? We're going to talk about all of that. But first, I want to ask you, how are you doing today?
Well, today I'm doing great. Stoked to be here, part of this podcast. And I had a pretty creative day. It's middle of July, so what better thing to do in order to keep cool than work on a Christmas song? So that's what I've been doing.
Who is it for? Are you writing it?
I am, yeah. So I'm not sure who it's for. I mean, I'd like to release it at some point, but I'm involved with a publishing company, BMG, and I've taken stabs at music placement in the past. To be honest, the best luck I've had in the world of music is just doing what I've always been doing. But it's still a fun exercise for me to write in that kind of way. So I'll share the song with them. Maybe I'll put it out under my own name, or I don't know. Maybe I'll convince the Caven guys to jump in on it. We'll see. It's only July, so we got 6 months to figure it out.
I used to, when I was younger and more judgmental, I used to scoff at the idea of, bands in this world of music doing Christmas songs. But I actually enjoy it now because it's like, why wouldn't I want to hear Christmas music from bands I enjoy rather than all the older stuff?
I totally hear you on that, but let's be real. I mean, a lot of Christmas music is pretty terrible, and I can say that now because I've actually just been researching and going back and listening to this Christmas song or this Christmas record, not super attentively, but just sort of grazing over stuff. And I can't remember the name of the Christmas record. I think it's called A Very Special Christmas. It came out in like the 80s, and U2 is on it, and Bon Jovi and Madonna. And, I sort of skipped through this thing, and I came to realize, wow, Run DMC has hands down the best Christmas track on this record.
Is that the one from the beginning of Die Hard?
It must be. Yeah. I can't hold a candle to Run DMC, but I'm going to do my best with this Christmas song I'm working on.
You've got to try. I mean, I love the idea of a cave-in Christmas song. I think that would be good.
Thanks, man. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
So you said you work doing publishing with BMG?
Well, I'm actively involved with them. So, when it comes to writing music, I always have the option to use their resources for seeking song placements or reaching out to any number of other writers, musicians, artists that are affiliated within the publishing company to co-write and work on music. They have an office in New York. And so when I lived in New York, I was there very frequently, involved in all kinds of things. I moved to Massachusetts about 2 years ago. So my involvement with BMG has changed as a result of that. But it's been a great experience. Just getting to know some really wonderful people over there, and, getting out of my comfort zone and just doing weird stuff for me, and I've come to realize that people that work in that world, that operate heavily within the world of publishing and sync and placement and co-writes, I mean, they make it their lives and they really invest themselves, much like I've invested myself in touring bands and, Caven since 1995 and Mutoid Man for 10 years now. And so it's tough. It's very competitive in that way because the people who do it, they're there to do it, full time, full on. And, I just kind of dip my toes in. But anything that gets me to write music and just to stay active and be prolific, I usually find it to be fairly like a healthy thing, a healthy exercise to engage in.
Absolutely. So do you actually write music that someone will use, or are you seeking placement for existing bands, or both? Like, how does it work?
Well, I've done some co-writes with artists, bands, working on material that we either come up with together, or it might just be like a nugget or a fraction of an idea that turns into something greater after a collaboration. But I'm picky, I don't want to work with just anybody. And, I think that's also something that artists should be aware of is their biases and their tastes and to always seek making better music. So I think across the board, I'm not necessarily the best fit for a lot of potential co-writes out there. But that's what makes it fun for me. It's because it's not something I rely upon. It's not something I invest myself in 100%. My bands are super active and they take up a lot of bandwidth, a lot of creative energy. So, I sort of reserve the co-writing and producing and that sort of thing just for special occasions.
Gotcha. It's got to be nice to be working with music still, right? Like, I mean, the podcast is a grind at this point, but it's stuff that I love, so I enjoy it. Do you feel that way about working with BMG?
Well, I just feel that way in general. I might just be having a good wave right now. But I definitely do not take it for granted at this point in my life. And for a number of reasons. It's a way to stay in touch with my friends, honestly. We're all getting to that point where we're heavily invested in home life and families and having kids. And, everybody exists sort of in their own bubbles, which is cool. And that's normal for this period of life, I think. But that's how we socialize is, get together and write music or book a tour or make a record. So the fact that I have my hands in a lot of active musical sources and bands and projects, it just keeps me in touch with people. And I find that to be very healthy in itself.
You know what? I'm happy to hear you say that because sometimes I feel weird, like, oh, I only hang out with people if it's band practice or a tour or some collaboration or something like that. But that's mostly how I connect with people, and that's mostly how I like to connect with people.
That's great. Yeah, I wouldn't feel weird about that at all. It's a gift, really. If the music keeps drawing you and your friends back together to do stuff, that's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. So what's your situation? Married, girlfriend? What's going on?
I have a girlfriend. We're currently in a long distance relationship, so it's a little tricky, but we have plans to move in together pretty soon. I'm pretty stoked about that. And I feel very fortunate to be involved with her. And we've been together now for about 4 years. We've known each other for a little bit longer, but it's going great. Yeah. How about yourself?
Where does she live?
She lives in Greenpoint.
Ah,
yeah.
That's just north of me. I'm in Williamsburg.
Oh, right on.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. And me, I am currently single, but I am open to I am open to a collaboration.
Awesome. Well, you hear that, people?
The word is out.
Yeah.
the word is out. Look
Get in
out.
on it.
So, yeah. So you moved to New York City in when? 2012 when you lived here?
Was it 2012? It may have been 2011, actually.
What prompted you to move here in 2011?
A couple things, actually. I sort of hit a wall creatively in my work. And at the time, Caven had just completed the White Silence record, which is one of my favorite Caven records. And we worked on that basically just getting together in our rehearsal space at a very leisurely pace. And my role in that record was very much just like producer, engineer. I wrote maybe 2 songs on the album, which is strange for a Caven record. Not so much these days, but back in 2010 when we were working on the album, it was sort of a new thing for me to creatively, in the world of writing, to take such a back seat. And, I was still involved in the work that the other guys were coming up with. And, Caleb as a songwriter and Adam, those guys really were just blossoming in such cool ways. And, so I felt very fortunate and lucky to be around that. But I knew something was off creatively. Like I wasn't super in touch with writing heavy music. I certainly enjoyed the recording part of making White Silence and the whole sort of assembly of that record. It's such a wild sounding record for a number of reasons, but I'm very proud of it. But I had this feeling that something wasn't right in the world of creativity, in my world of creativity, and so that was one thing. And I just felt like, well, maybe a change of scenery could sort of shake things up in a cool way. And I mentioned Caleb. around that time, he had just moved from Los Angeles, where he spent 4 years, and he and his wife and their son, Desmond, they came back to the East Coast, and I was inspired by that. I was inspired by the fact that they just kind of uprooted, went across the country, did something new, and we actually had conversations about that. And when I mentioned to him the possible move out of Boston because of a woman that I was seeing at the time, she lived in New York. Yeah, another long distance relationship that connected me with New York City, you know. Yeah, that's another huge factor in my decision to move to New York, was to be with this woman. And, that lasted for about 5 years. And it was a wonderful experience. It ended in a way that, it was challenging. But ultimately, I decided to stay in New York. The band Mutoid Man was in full swing at that point. And, I had this active thing that was exciting, and it seemed to have just sort of a life of its own at that point. And, that influenced me to stay longer, even though the relationship had ended. And also my relationship with BMG was very active at that time as well. And I was very involved in, trying to pitch songs for placements and co-writes. I mean, I was very green in that world, but very excited to just try to make something of it. And so all things told, my stay in New York lasted about 11 years. They say the 10-year mark is when you become an official New Yorker. So I did the extra year just to, for a little bonus point, and then I peaced out.
You have the badge now. It's fine.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So when does Mutoid Man start? Does that start when you come down here?
Not too long after I moved to New York. When I made the move, I brought a full stack with me, basically the rig that I used to play in Caven. I didn't have much in the way of gear, and I still don't. I'm very just sort of, I'll use whatever I need, basically. I just like to keep it simple. So I had my rig with me, and I had no place to put it. So I shoved it in a closet, and that's where it sat for months. And it wasn't until Ben Kohler, who was living in Williamsburg at the time, actually, no, he was living in Greenpoint, but he had a rehearsal space in Williamsburg. He said, "Hey, man, why don't you get that thing out of your closet and bring it down to my space?" And I had been to his rehearsal space, and I was like, "Damn, dude, I don't even know if we can fit this thing." I mean, it was very much a New York City closet-sized rehearsal space, just jammed full of gear, small to begin with. But, I appreciated the invite, and I took him up on it, and we made it work somehow. And that's when we started jamming. And, he and I had already sort of established a chemistry in Caven, because prior to that, there was a period of time where JR, drummer of Caven, sustained a wrist injury, and it sidelined him. He ended up moving out of the country, where he met his now wife. And in the process of leaving, he was able to heal himself and get proper care for his injury. And of course, met his wife, which is super cool. But in that time period, Caven had released a record called Perfect Pitch Black. And so with JR sidelined, and the band wanting to do something to push the record and tour in support of it, that's when the conversation with Ben came up. And Ben had been playing in a band with Adam McGrath of Caven. It was an early version of what became the band Clouds. And so I think all these dots were kind of getting connected, and that's ultimately how Ben ended up in, behind the drums with Caven for, this tour cycle on this record. And in that process, we wrote a couple new songs. We wrote a song called Shapeshifter and another song called Dead Already. And we recorded those Renegade rehearsal space style on a 4-track machine and put them onto single, and we sold that on these tours. And so this was the start of this sort of creative relationship that I had with Ben, and it was like a jumping point for what became Mutoid Man.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't know that Ben lived here at one point, so that makes sense that you guys got together then when you got here.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to have an opportunity to try to squeeze my gear into that little rehearsal space, and super cool of him to invite me. And the early jams that we had were very much in the vein of where the Shapeshifter Dead Already single sort of left off. Which was awesome. There's so much fire and energy in those recordings and those songs, and we were just tracking stuff very humbly, using iPhone voice memo, and he had a little laptop with a microphone. And the early stuff we were coming up with, he would put together just quick little edits of arrangement ideas. He's such a great arranger. He would send me stuff, and I noticed when I uploaded it into iTunes, when I was still doing that back in 2012 or whatever, the artist name was Narcoleptic Beagle. It's like, that is great. Okay. So I'm in a 2-piece called Narcoleptic Beagle. It's this thrashy sort of, 2-person thing. I mean, it's about as Brooklyn as it gets,
So when Mutoid Man is coming together, is there anything that you had in mind that you wanted to do differently from Cave-In or previous bands, or was there something you wanted to do with this arrangement that you weren't getting from one of the other bands, or was it just was what it was?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I thought too much about it. I just sort of let it happen, and I think as a result, it just sort of naturally became different than Cave-In. And any other project that I have been involved with. Certainly Cave-In got to a point where, we were overthinking things. And, that's something that the band has suffered from several times over our trajectory. And so, with Mutoid Man, there wasn't that sense of overthinking things. It was just naturally playing to what Ben's vibe was and his excitement for things. And, we have a lot of the same reference points as far as, our language for music and making music, botch riffs, dead guy parts, a coalesce thing, or a Dillinger part, and, this makes perfect sense to us. I mean, for me, it makes far more sense than any like actual music theory, to talk in those terms. So that's how it started. And, Ben has a very specific feel, and his background is in spastic metal and jazz. So if you listen to his playing and with that in mind, you can sort of hear those elements, just converging in a very cool, peculiar way. And I was just trying to keep up, really. That was the fun of it, was like, we'd come up with a riff in 13/8, and we'd play this thing until 13/8 felt normal. And that was a really cool feeling. And then just when things felt normal, it was like, okay, this riff is broken up into 8 and then 5. So now that we're comfortable with that, let's come up with another part and throw the 5 first, and then follow the 5 part with the 8. And my brain would just be all twisted again. And I'd have to, recalibrate my thinking and what my fingers were doing. And it was just really exciting and creative and fun. And, again, with Ben being such a great arranger, he would send me these jams that were all sort of cut up in the formations of potential songs. And it was like hearing myself playing music again for the first time. It was a real sort of rebirth of my hand at being creative with heavy music, which is something, like I said, I felt like I had lost when I was living in Boston shortly before I moved. And with Mutoid Man, I was getting my swagger back, and it was something new and exciting. And we were also referencing Sir Lord Baltimore, which is a band that formed in the late 60s, maybe early 70s, a three-piece band from Brooklyn, and they're just incredible. So that band came up quite a bit as far as like, well, here's this cool thing that actually happened here where we are in Brooklyn working on this wild, crazy rock and roll. Let's sort of dig up that spirit. Let's try to, we're breathing the same air basically that they did. Let's see where that goes. So, just real fun, exciting, cool times for making music.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear you say, you're getting your hand back into heavier music and are excited about that, because I felt that too when I heard the first release, Helium Head, when that made its rounds, when you guys were playing, like, I was like, oh, Steve is back and he's doing like a heavier thing. Now, yes, Caven was back doing a heavier thing too, but it had been a few years since White Silence came out. But me personally, I was getting back into this music and discovering a lot of things. So to see you back in this form and doing it was exciting for me on the outside as well.
Oh, that's great to hear, man. That's very cool. And yeah, Helium Head is the name of a Sir Lord Baltimore song. And, we just ran with it. We got so much inspiration from that band, and a lot of like proto metal, that was a big reference to like Captain Beyond, early Judas Priest. All this stuff was fun to sort of try to dig our hands in, sort of sink our teeth into, but then revert that back to the energy and the wildness of like mid to late 90s hardcore from the world of hardcore that we spawned from. All the stuff that I referenced earlier, like Dillinger Escape Plan, Botch, Coalesce, Dead Guy, Kiss It Goodbye. The list goes on. There's so many great bands from that era. Threadbare. Stuff that gets thrown around a lot, as with Caven as well, and creative ventures with that band. But, we were really bringing it to the surface and trying to give it this like 70s proto metal rock and roll swagger.
Yes, it definitely comes across. Like Caven occasionally has those theatric metal leanings with the big rock riffs, but Mutoid Man really took that and ran with it. And I'm happy to hear that we have pretty much the same exact list of influences on the hardcore side as well.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. So you're in Brooklyn. We have the band together. We have a release out. How is it going? How do you feel about it? Is it weird for Caven at all back in Massachusetts? Are they like, hey, why aren't you playing with us? Are you still going up there and playing with them? Like, what's the status of all that?
That was an interesting time. Going back to having conversations with Caleb about his move to LA. He was someone that I sort of opened up to about this whole thing, and he actually encouraged me to just get lost and living in a new place. Because as I was entertaining the idea pretty heavily, as a way of sort of providing reassurance to the guys in Caven, I was like, look, I'll make I'll make trips up here, pilgrimages to play music, and we can keep something going at somewhat of a regular pace. And Caleb was like, listen, that's cool and all, but don't worry about it. In fact, I would encourage you to just, really immerse yourself in New York and get lost in it. And he was right. That was good advice. And what ended up happening was a version of Caleb's band Zozobra took shape. I guess it would be, if you're counting, it would be maybe the third incarnation of Zozobra, which was essentially Caven without me. And to be honest, that did feel a little weird. Those guys came to Brooklyn to make what ended up being the Savage Masters EP. And I remember visiting them at the studio that they were working at with Andrew Schneider and hearing playbacks. And I liked what I was hearing, but I felt like for the first time, maybe since ever knowing those guys, or at least, in our relationship as Caven, since 1995, that, I was hearing stuff sort of behind a glass, in the sense that like I could only look at it, or I couldn't actually touch it, or I couldn't have a hand in saying, what if we did this part twice as long, or what if this vocal happened here instead of there, and what if we just changed this riff a little bit? And I had this feeling like I wanted that. I wanted to participate, but it just wasn't available to me. And I think also what those guys were experiencing was just this natural thing that happens. Any formation of a band starts to, create its own dynamics as sort of interpersonal relationships change. And so without me in the picture, Zozobra with Adam and JR and Caleb, I mean, they started to have their own thing going on, and for better or worse, they had their own like new conflicts and stuff, and new weirdness, and but also new levels of closeness as well. And so when we got together as Caven, these things would sort of carry over, and so that was kind of interesting, and it just created a new dynamic that we hadn't ever experienced before. But it wasn't a huge deal because Caven wasn't super active as a band. I mean, we were getting together just to hang out. I would take trips up to New Hampshire for like family parties and get-togethers and such, or camping trips. So we were still like very socially involved in each other's lives. But creatively it was tough. And I'm sure being away from Massachusetts contributed to that. But, I don't have any regrets. And I think the advice that Caleb gave me was good because it allowed me to fully enjoy or get the full experience out of whatever it was I was meant to have as a New Yorker for those years. I think Caven is also in a lot of ways, I don't want to say better off, because it's absolutely fucking horrible that we don't have Caleb with us anymore.
Yes.
But, I'm also a believer that just time has to play out in a certain way in order for people to sometimes not take things for granted, and I wouldn't say I took Caven for granted during those years, but I think just not being present, it was something that I'd built since 1995, and then just not being near it like I had been for years of my life. It was strange. It was strange to reflect back on. And so now in 2023, I think having been through all that, the ups and downs of this timeline that we're talking about, just makes me appreciate things more.
Yes, hindsight is always 2020. I mean, that's just the way it goes. And yeah, like difficult things happen, like the passing of Caleb. I hate to turn these types of things into an example because, it's a tragedy and we feel the feelings and we go through it all. But the one benefit is, like what you're saying, it does put things into perspective for us and helps us appreciate things more.
Yeah, it's really I don't want to say the only way to get through grief, but it is the foundation in a lot of ways of dealing with grief. Is you have to just go, what can I take from this? And it's a hard question to ask yourself in the throes of it, but it's a necessary one. And so, I sometimes look at those years that I wasn't as present with mixed feelings. But I've learned to just sort of accept things for what they are. And there's so much beautiful stuff that came out of my time in New York, so many great relationships, the formation of Mutoid Man, opportunities, just a different way of seeing life, things that Caleb encouraged me to seek out, in the process of uprooting from where I lived since I was, a kid, since 1979, Massachusetts. That's what it had been for me. So I'm thankful to him for encouraging me to make that move and to, seek out that experience.
Absolutely. And Mutoid Man continued on strong. We had Bleeder in 2015. We had Warmones in 2017, and we know you did plenty of playing out and touring as well. At what point does Cave-In start working on material again? I guess you guys had some material that eventually became Final Transmission, right?
Yeah, that is correct. Final Transmission is essentially all the most listenable, most cohesive pieces of work that we had recorded with Caleb between White Silence and his passing.
How many times did you guys get together while Caleb was still alive up until 2018? Like how often had you been working on material?
We had this whole thing where we tried doing a remote recording, years before COVID and, years before everybody started, buying home recording gear and shit. So this was just born more out of the idea of trying to be creative with me in New York. And that yielded some interesting results. Not all of them were necessarily great, but the one song that we all came together on in that little experiment is a song called Lunar Day from the Final Transmission record. And closer to the end of 2017, we got together once in December of 2017, and we worked on what became the songs Strange Reflection and Lanterna. And then we got together in the new year to just hang out. Actually, I think that was the year before. Man, my timeline is so scrambled.
COVID just made everything so confusing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just very, very weird time scramble. But in 2018, it was February of that year that we got together again, and we recorded what became 4 more songs on the Final Transmission record. Basically, the 4 songs, the 4 full band songs that lead off that record. So, yeah, there was certainly like a gap of time where we weren't actively doing the band in the traditional way. But yeah, we had the remote thing for a minute, and we were still just getting together to hang out and do fun, cool shit, whether it was outdoors or, birthdays. And, I mentioned New Year's, we got together, I think it was New Year's of 2017 or something, when we hung out in, of all places, Adam's younger brother's basement. And that was a super fun time. So yeah, we were still very close.
When's the last time you saw Caleb? When's the last time you spoke to him?
The last time I saw Caleb was that time that I mentioned in February, where we got together for a weekend and recorded those 4 songs, which ended up on Final Transmission. I did speak to him once after that, and it was maybe about a week before he passed. Yeah. And it was a quick conversation, but I do remember he was in his truck and he was driving his kids to a music class, maybe, I think, piano lessons, I think. But yeah, it was just a quick call.
Yeah, that was a major loss. I don't know you guys personally. I didn't know Caleb personally, but even I felt that once news of that came out. So I can only imagine what you guys went through and still go through, because grief is not a linear process.
No, it's certainly very layered, and, it's like a ninja. It just kind of creeps out of nowhere and kicks you all over again, and it can be the most unassuming thing that can trigger it. And so learning about this, which is something they don't teach you in school, it was certainly, a life lesson, as they say.
How much did Final Transmission change? I guess you had to finish that up after Caleb had died. Did a lot change? Did you have to record any more stuff?
Well, again, the whole concept of that record was rounding up bits that we had done with Caleb, the most listenable things, the most cohesive things. And yeah, certainly after he passed, we scrounged up what we could of these moments that we had had together, which, it was meant to be the start of writing a new Cave-In record. And it was actually Caleb who kind of came up with this, this mission statement of what a new Caven record in 2017, it was 2017 at the time, what that would sound like. So you're just hearing the beginnings of what we were trying to accomplish, through his vision. And the idea was always to go to a studio and to record with an engineer or several engineers and do it quote unquote proper, the way that we had done, prior to White Silence. And as fun as White Silence was, it was challenging. We were recording in a rehearsal space, and it's a weird sounding record for that reason. It's not traditionally quote unquote good, but it's wild and it's nasty and it's feral, and I think it's cool for that reason.
That, and you know what? Sing My Loves is now my all-time favorite Caven song. So that came from it. So you guys, you just continually put out great content. So we have that at least.
Absolutely. I mean, that is hands down one of the greatest Caven songs ever written. So yeah, I mean, Final Transmission is what it is because it was born out of necessity. And we're trying to do everything that we could at the time to raise money for, the Scofields, Caleb's surviving family. And we knew that we could put this record out and it would be like getting to spend time with Caleb in a way, not just for us, but, for fans and, fans of his music and fans of the band. So we put it out and we raised some money for the family, and it exists as a very unique document in the world of Caven for that reason.
Yes, and in terms of a record, nothing to scoff at either. Some of my favorite Caven songs, Shake My Blood, easily a top 10 song from you guys.
Oh, thanks, man. That's another Caleb song. That's just a beautiful piece of music that he wrote, and we put it together at that hangout recording session we did in February 2018. And that was basically his introduction to this really wonderful open tuning that we call Secret C, that we've written a lot of material in, and just the sound and the tonality of that tuning. It reminds us of him.
I love that. So Caven went on to release Heavy Pendulum in 2022. So that is our first proper studio album in quite a while. So that must have felt good, right? I've had Adam on the show and he talked about some of that process, but it has to be bittersweet. On one hand, we're together, we're back in the studio, we're releasing a kick-ass record, but on the other hand, Caleb is not here.
Yeah, that's true. That's something we all felt. And, Nate played Caleb's bass on the record. There were several times during the writing process where I was asking myself, what would Caleb do here? How might he approach something? Musically, lyrically. And, going back to what I said earlier about his mission statement from 2017, he wanted the band to go back into the studio to make a record. And with Heavy Pendulum, we felt like, in a way, we were fulfilling that vision.
So how do we know when it's time to put together a new Mutoid Man record? When does it happen? How does it happen?
That's a great question. I mean, it's been 6 years since the Warmones record, which came out in 2017. It's been a wild and weird 6 years for a number of reasons, and lots of ups and downs with that band. But Ben and I think where we came together in the ups and downs through the good and the bad was knowing that we were sitting on lots of great material that had just potential to be another Mutoid Man record. The band was so active during the Bleeder years and the Warmones era, touring on those records. We were all still living in New York at that time. So we were a fully functioning band. And between that and all the stuff we were doing with 2 Minutes to Late Night, we just always had a reason to get together. It was a super busy time for that band. And so in the process, we were always just documenting little jams, little riff ideas, song ideas, in all shapes and sizes as we did these things, on the road or at our rehearsal space or at St. Vitus in the middle of, doing takes for filming the show, 2 minutes to late night. So yeah, it was just a matter of things lining up where we could truly focus on honing the material. And with all the stuff that went down between 2017 and the making of the Mutants album in the beginning of 2022, it was just a real slippery beast, trying to wrangle this thing.
How so?
Well, a number of reasons. I mean, the big one was Caleb passing, and my focus shifting back to Caven, just putting the wheels back on the band to do the benefit shows and the Final Transmission record to raise money for the family, and it was just necessary for a number of reasons, and we all sort of powered through our grief by Caven being an active thing again, and it was truly necessary. I can't think of any other word to describe what we were doing at that point. So yeah, a lot of bandwidth, a lot of attention going into that. And then, when things started to settle down a little bit, we experienced a personnel change in the band. It's something that we slowly saw coming, towards, I would say, like the end of 2018 going into 2019. And we could just see that Nick was struggling being on the road. And there were certain actions that sort of prompted some real questions between Ben and I as to, whether or not this was truly sustainable with Nick. And, as I say this, it was really tough because, I talk about wonderful relationships that I made moving to New York, and Nick he's up there on the top of the list. I mean, just a wonderful guy, one of the funniest people that I've ever met, and just goes above and beyond to help his loved ones and his friends. And, the band wouldn't be what it is without Nick. He just truly just shaped it with his playing and his personality. And, he really lit a fire under my ass and Ben's. And, he was excited. He wanted to play loud and fierce, and it was everything that band needed, So, we saw what being on the road as much as we had been was doing to him. And, he just functions better, I think, not in a constantly changing environment away from home.
Right.
And, he was just acting out in certain ways that we just knew that something was going to have to change in order for us to continue doing the band as a sustainable touring thing. And that prompted a very difficult conversation with Nick at the, I think it was the summer of 2019. And so that pushed things back.
How did that go? Do you guys still talk? Is it okay now? I'm sure it was difficult at the time of the conversation.
It was difficult. Nick and I, we had some tough moments on the road at the beginning of 2019. And we were both living in Greenpoint at that time. So it was easy to get together. And I just hit him up, and we took a walk around Transmitter Park. And I just, I had I may have nominated myself, but it was also, convenient that we lived basically just a couple blocks away from each other to have a face-to-face about where things were headed. And I was the one that delivered the news that, hey man, I just don't think this is working. And, I think we're going to have to ask you to leave the band. And it was tough. I can't remember the last time I had that conversation with somebody. Thankfully it hasn't happened in a long time. And there was a period with Caven where it felt like, the band was this revolving door of bass players and vocalists, but that was like years ago,
Yeah.
I was a teenager, I think the last time that I had to ask someone to leave a band.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a fun conversation. But Nick took it well. And I think Nick was also looking to make a change in his life. And Nick, I got to hand it to him. He understood that sometimes you got to lose things in order to gain something else. And I think he did everything in his power to, quote unquote, man up and to just face whatever he was looking to work on as an opportunity. And that was the opportunity. That was the point. Like it wasn't going to get any lower than that. Like losing, a fully functioning, awesome, wild rock and roll band,
Right.
And so we still keep in touch. He's always sending me funny videos to check out, and he's constantly just making me laugh from afar. And his writing, his just awesome neoclassical like bass upstroke thing that he brought to the band. You can still hear that on Mutants. Siren Song really bears his mark. Parts of Broken Glass Ceiling. We worked on Call of the Void together. Nick Caggio's vibe and his whole thing is still very present on Mutants, which is super cool.
Nice. Yeah, he's got to have the chops to keep up with you and Ben, right?
We all pushed each other,
Yeah.
It was funny, we were thinking when we first met Nick, he actually mixed a 2-piece show that Ben and I did, which was like arguably the first Mutoid Man show before, we were like a full 3-piece band. But it was just Ben and I on stage at Vitus, just blowing off some steam, playing this wild, wacky shit that we were writing in his rehearsal space, before we even had a name. So Nick mixed that show, and I think we actually had a conversation that night where he approached us and was like, hey, if you guys ever need a bass player, just hit me up. And I don't remember if he had mentioned that he was a cellist or a stand-up bass player or something, or if that was like his primary instrument, but for some reason, we had it in our minds that we were being approached by the sound guy, the main sound guy at Vitus, the head front house there, who is a cello player. So, all right, I guess maybe we should try adding cello to this band. Let's make it Brooklyn and weird. But no, it turned out that he was just an incredible bass player. We were better off for it.
So we have Mutants coming out later this month. We must be excited about that, right? And everyone, Call of the Void, the single and video is out there now, so we can listen to that while we wait for the whole record to come out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super stoked on this record. It's very much a Mutoid Man record. If you love the band, there's no reason why you won't love this record as well. But there are some differences. Obviously, the big one being Jeff Matz in the band. Yes.
At what point does he join and how? That's something else I wanted to ask about. Jeff Matz from High on Fire, yes?
That's correct, yeah. So at the time when we were going through the transition with Nick no longer being in the band, Ben was still sidelined at that point with an elbow injury. And so the 2 tours that the band did at the beginning of 2019 were with Chris Maggio on drums. And at the time, Chris was also playing in High on Fire. And, when things were going down the way that they did with Nick, Chris being just a great friend and someone who cares about the band and, cares about us, was like, hey, I don't know if this is my place to say, but if you guys are looking for a bass player, he's like, I think Jeff would be a great fit. He's a musical phenom in his own right. He's incredibly devoted to just playing music. I mean, that guy lives and breathes playing music. And I think Chris understood the stamina that especially Ben and I have for, honing riffs, songs, practicing, rehearsing, just doing weird, fun exercises to make rehearsals interesting, playing shit at double speed as if these songs aren't wild and fast enough. And I think Chris just was trying to connect the dots in a helpful way. And, I didn't know Jeff. I had maybe met Jeff once or twice in years past, maybe just quickly on the road, like just passing through as we often do, whether it was a venue or a festival or a club or whatever. But it turns out that Jeff was interested. I mean, Chris kind of made it all happen. He sort of set everything in motion. And, that prompted a conversation with Jeff over the phone. And I just got a great vibe from him. And I love the idea of like injecting some West Coast into this salty East Coast thing that Ben and I had going. Jeff is a creative force and high on fire. He writes a lot of stuff, and he plays all kinds of instruments, stringed instruments on the recordings. So I just felt like, well, this could be great, And so we arranged to get together, and that happened at the beginning of March of 2020. We got together for like 4 or 5 days at Ben's rehearsal studio in LA, because he's living in LA now. So we got together and we set up a little recording rig, and just to document what was going to happen. And we said, hey, all right, we got all our gear going here. Why don't we just hit record and just make sure that all the sounds are what they should be, and we're not blowing out any mic signals or, whatever. Let's just see what happens. And so we did. And then 15 minutes later, we stopped the recording, and we're just like, what the hell was that? We had just had this like impromptu jam. It was sort of like freeform proto metal, a little bit of surf rock, definitely some classic rock. And it was so fun and transformative. And just, like I said, time just sort of disappeared in the coolest way, and the ways that you want time to disappear when you are just lost in music.
Right.
It was just a fantastic way to like introduce Jeff into the band, and for the band to like, kick things off with a new person. It was like, wow, that was super fun and cool. And so we just started working on new music right there and then. And then of course fucking COVID happens, So to go back to like what happened, what was sidelining the band? Well, this thing called the pandemic certainly, had its say, and how much we could and couldn't do. I mean, we were all spread out. I was still living in New York at the time, and like I said, Ben was in LA, and Jeff lives in Vancouver, Oregon, just outside of Portland. So, that threw things on hold again.
Well, the good news is we got the new Cave-In record, and we've got the new Mutoid Man record coming out. So now we've got it all.
Yeah, man. I'm really stoked. It's been just a great wave of creativity and musicianship for everybody involved in these bands. And I'm glad that Mutoid gets to put out a document of music with Jeff. It's really rewarding, and now with Nate and with Cave-In, it's like it's like fresh bass player 101. You get this new vibe for both bands, and it's all built upon things that Caleb built with Cave-In and what Mutoid Man and Nick built together. So it's new stuff resting upon what's already just a great foundation for both bands.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's Grammy Award winning Jeff Matz now. So now you're a Grammy adjacent Mutoid Man.
Oh, it feels great, any minute now, any minute that hit song is just going to come out of nowhere, and I'll have one to put on my toilet.
Well, we're winding down here, but I want to ask some Cave-In lore questions in the end here, if I may.
Okay.
Until Your Heart Stops, how shortly before the recording did Dave leave?
Well, he and Caleb were like ships passing in the night. Caleb joined the band, and then we played maybe 2 shows together as a 5-piece with Dave. And I want to say March of 1998. Maybe February, but it was one of the 2 months where Dave was no longer in the band, and we were scratching our heads going, okay, we're a 4-piece now, and we've got this recording just 3 months away, 2 months away, actually, if it's March. Okay, this is scary. and these guys were going, listen, man, you got this. Just lower the mic stand, assume a James Hetfield stance, and, you can do it. They were super encouraging of me just fronting the band. And so, it was, like I said, March, February, sometime around then.
And how much work did you have to do ahead of that recording? Now as the frontman, did you have to rewrite parts of songs? Did you have to write all the lyrics? Like, how much did you do?
The song arrangements didn't change very much. But I was sort of turning my brain off to, I would say, 70% of the areas of music where vocals should have gone. And in my mind, I just wanted to leave that to Dave. And so when Dave was no longer in the band, it was a mad scramble. Once we started rehearsing as a 4-piece, I just got on the mic and I probably was just screaming nonsense, sounds of all kinds, just to figure out what I could and couldn't do, like what I could say or what I could vocalize with my fingers doing this riff or playing this part, where that shouldn't happen. And if it was going to happen, like how many syllables did I have for this section? It was that's how it went back then. But luckily, being in college, I was taking a creative writing class. And as a result, I just had all kinds of shit written from these assignments and papers and such. And I was able to just throw it all up in the air. And as it landed, I could just pull this line or grab this thought or insert this theory or these words into this, like I said, a 70% template of emptiness that needed vocals, or in my mind needed vocals. So that's really how it happened. It was a fucking chaotic, wild 2 months, to be perfectly honest. But that's probably why the record sounds as crazy as it does,
Well, hey, you pulled it off.
Something happened.
So while Antenna was out, while you were on RCA, when Adam was on the show, he mentioned the last major label type tour you did was with Muse, and you're playing like big venues. And I know Caven also toured with Foo Fighters at one point. Now, I know you guys got burnt out on that whole experience and just didn't want to do it anymore and started cycling old songs back into the set. But could you have kept going with that if you wanted to? Like, could you have done another record with RCA? Could you have kept doing those support roles on these big tours? Like, could you have conceivably kept doing that stuff?
Yes and no. I say yes because we ultimately approached the label about getting dropped, because when we were finally assigned with another A&R person after several months of having nobody allocated to represent the band at the label, we had upwards of like $1 million price tag on our heads between getting signed and tour support and the recording and all the expenses that just came with being a major label band at that time. So it wasn't like anyone was jumping at the chance to represent the band. We were this like tainted thing, in the eyes of the major label world. We were essentially a commercial failure, the honeymoon was over. So if we had stayed on the label, we could have continued working with our then A&R person, but it really would have been an uphill battle. And I don't think it was something any of us had the energy to do. And our manager at the time was supportive of us getting dropped. So, she was like our point of contact. She was like our connect to that world. And if she's supporting the idea of getting dropped, then, there was really no reason to stay.
Right. Because, if she's fighting against it, that says one thing. But if she's like, yeah, probably a good idea, then, come on.
Absolutely. And we were begging them for tour support by the end. We had to fly to New York specifically for a meeting with RCA. I think it was probably in the middle of a tour, if I remember correctly. It was like on a day off where we flew to RCA to basically beg them for tour support to go on tour with Muse. And, it wasn't just like money was being thrown around willfully at that point. We had to ask for it. And the Inspire video that we made, the fact that we came up with this treatment. I mean, it was Caleb's idea, but the treatment was such that, we're breaking into a music store to film a music video and we leave with their surveillance footage. That's true. Like we did get money from RCA to make that video, but the concept is very reflective of what we were dealing with at the time. Like,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, like if we hadn't begged them for money to like basically have somewhat of a budget to make a video, I mean, we probably would have had to have done that in real life to come out with something, so again, just brilliantly executed idea. And again, just very, very reflective of what we were dealing with at the time. So, I think we made the right move. It was born out of necessity, and it did push us to get back in touch with ourselves, as painful as it was in some ways, with our tails between our legs. But shortly after getting dropped, we did one of the best tours that we had done in a long time, and that's saying a lot because, the Muse tour was great for what it was, but we didn't actually feel like we were truly connecting with people until we went out with Converge, supporting them while they were doing a tour shortly after the release of You Fail Me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like those guys were sort of like, hey, all right, come back to this world, lick your wounds, play for your fans again, and it's all going to be okay. And that was truly a great tour. That's where we really reconnected with ourselves and our fans at the same time. I think Lollapalooza in 2003 was the start of us reconnecting with ourselves, reintroducing, stuff from Until Your Heart Stops, and just, the sets getting a little bit more diversified, a little bit more interesting again. So, crazy time.
Well, it's good to have you back. When I was younger, I was initially, I'm talking like 17 years old. I was a little upset when you guys changed sound because I was like, how could my favorite band do this? But if you pull the, and eventually I came back around because now I'm old and I don't care. Like, you guys can do no wrong in my eyes. But when you pull the lens back, right, I really don't think you changed all that much. Jupiter is still heavy, right? And we can always hear you in whatever album it is.
I hope so. It was exciting back then to make these wild left turns and surprise people and work with the element of surprise. Just surprise in itself, can be a real powerful thing. And we took that to the max. We pushed it to its limit with our abilities, and it was fun and exciting. And in some ways, it bit us in the ass, and we recognize that now. But these are all expressions of freedom that I think every artist should feel enticed to explore because it's ultimately their own,
Yes.
And it's important to establish that, The reason I ever picked up a guitar in the first place was to just hear what sound will be like emanating from this instrument that I'm holding. And it's there was this element of control. It was something that I was seeking. It's something that I still seek to this day, and I hope it never goes away. And there's a freedom in that. And freedom comes in a lot of weird ways when it comes to the world of music. And as long as you're doing it with your friends and your friends are on board and you're all together. If the ship is going to sail, then it sails gloriously with everybody on deck. And if it sinks, then at least you're all sinking together. And, that's the best way to die as far as like killing a creative endeavor. But that's the thing. I look back on these experiences and I'm with my friends. So how bad could it be?
Exactly. And I think Cave-In in our world of music is one of, if not the most influential bands out there, because the risks you took and the things you did, a lot of people followed in your example. What do you think of that?
I think that's cool. I think bands have maybe followed in our example, and what I love to see is where they don't suffer the pitfalls that we did, and they, they reach these places that are super cool and exciting. And I love bands that they also take the same risks that we did, and maybe they don't have the same type of luck, but it's the fact that they tried. And if we're any reference point to, either side of the coin, right? The band that they look at Cave-In as an example of what not to do, and the other side of the coin being, the example of the things that you should do, but maybe, you just don't have the same luck or whatever. It's all good and it's all exciting, and it's validating. It proves like, okay, shit, people were listening, like this all wasn't for just ourselves, which in the end, if it was, I mean, there's something beautiful about that too, because I have some of my best memories playing music, just rehearsing, or just in a practice space, or before I could even drive, when I was getting rides to, go play music with JR and in the attic of his grandparents' place. And, it was just the ecstasy of playing music with a live drummer for the first time. And it was just he and I, maybe his neighbors heard us, but, they didn't sign up for it. Yeah, I mean, there's a real joy in that too. So, it's all just a reward on top of that, really. If other people get something out of this, then that's just awesome.
That's great. That's great. So a reminder to everyone, Mutants, the latest LP from Mutoid Man, will be out by the time you hear this. So we got to go pick that up. But Steve, is there any other Cave-In shows or Mutoid Man tours or anything else coming up that we want to alert the people to in the end here?
Sure. Yeah. Cave-In has some dates overseas in Europe, starting at August 17th, I think, at Arctangent Festival, which is a great festival that Mutoid Man played several years ago. Got awesome memories from that rainy, wild day. And then shortly after that, we got a Mutoid Man tour in Europe. So Europe gets to see a lot of me. And those Mutoid Man dates are for most of September. We'll be supporting the new record. Super exciting. Get to play all that stuff live for the first time. Really lay into it. And then from here on out, Cave-In has got 2 shows with the recently reunited Botch, which will be super fun.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So, and Converge is on the bill. So, it's about as like 90s as it gets,
That's a dream show right there. Everybody, if you can get to one of those shows, come on. What are we doing?
Yeah. I would have gone either way, I just happen to be playing. So, that's super cool. And
bonus.
And, maybe some other stuff coming up too, but, that's pretty much everything that's been announced. And, it's all looking like a great way to wrap up the rest of the year, 2023. So I'm super stoked.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited. And Steve, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. And, Cave-In is largely responsible for getting me into all this music in the first place. So thank you for that. And thank you for your time. And thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks, Keith. And thank you to anyone who's made it this far listening. Appreciate it.
And there you have it. Stephen Brodsky. Wow. Great conversation. Tommy, I was looking forward to this one a lot. I would say more than any other band on the show. I was looking forward to talking to someone from Cave-In the most, because there was so many specific questions I had about their history that I did not know before. So when I had Adam on the show, I covered all the deep dive Cave-In stuff I was curious about. Recording Until Your Heart Stops. How they decided to change their sound. When they did it. The major label experience. Everything after that, Final Transmission, Heavy Pendulum, all that. All of my questions got answered. So when we landed Stephen for the show, I wanted to get the other piece that I didn't know about, right? When did he move to New York? Why did he move to New York? How did Mutoid Man get formed? What was that all about? What were his feelings about that? Was there things he wanted to do differently? And then, just all the extra Cave-In talk on top of that.
Yeah.
was just a bonus. I mean, hearing about more about Final Transmission and how they dealt with things after the tragic passing of Caleb, and at the end there where Steve was talking about the major label experience on RCA and how they had to, when that didn't work out, they had to kind of come back and eat some humble pie and just reintegrate into things, because you remember, like, it was kind of rough for them because they were off on the space rock journey, and that's what they were doing. And I remember when they started playing older stuff again, and when they came back again, like, some people were kind of nasty to them. Like, remember Buddyhead, that website?
Oh my God, yeah. Holy shit.
They were brutal. Yeah.
I haven't heard that name in forever. Actually, it was funny. I actually just looked through a bunch of old flyers I had downstairs when I was cleaning shit out, and Buddyhead was a bunch of stuff that had booked a bunch of those shows.
Yeah, but they came back and they started doing their thing again, and some people were like, "Oh yeah, you said you were done, and now you're back." But I'm glad they're back, and now we're older. Cave In is just Cave In. Like I was telling Steve, they can do no wrong in my eyes. I love everything they've done. And everything they've done is just indistinguishably them, no matter what it is. If it's heavier, if it's not heavier, it doesn't matter. So I was just thrilled to have the opportunity to have Steve on the show.
Yeah, I still listen to a lot of Antenna. I like Antenna a lot. Stained Silver, Youth Override, I like. But I do go back to Until Your Heart Stops, like that kind of stuff more often than not, especially like even before that, the Beyond Hypothermia stuff, more often than not, especially because when I use music now, I use music as like a motivator. Like I'm driving to work and I need to get something like, off my chest, or I want to listen to something that kind of frees my mind. And I feel like Cave In is that perfect blend of like heavy and kind of space, especially with Until Your Heart Stops. Like you hear those things where you just go, that is the perfect blend of just that kind of like brutal breakdown and that space rock kind of noodling that they do. They do it so well. Like there's not many people out there in this world that can do that.
When I listen to Cave In now, I'm strictly in Jupiter and Forward territory now. Can you believe it?
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, see, now it's like when I had Kurt from Converge on the show, I entertained the idea of the Converge Classics tour, and yes, it would be fun to see those songs again. But when I listen to Converge, I listen to Jane Doe and Forward. And now with Cave In, I'm in the same territory. I start with Jupiter, and I'm listening to stuff from Jupiter and Forward. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
I think to a certain extent, Heavy Pendulum has a couple tracks that I'm like, I go back to. New Reality. Like I like
that's a modern classic. That is so good, that song.
It's a great song. And the structure of it in general, it really is. It just proves how much those guys are just not, it wasn't a fluke that they became famous. Like they're just really smart and well thought out musicians. Like it's really great stuff.
Mutoid Man, no slouches either. When I was piecing this all together, I went back and listened to their debut EP, which hooked me on them. And it was great hearing Steve talk about just how they were pushing themselves to play in like 13/8 and all these weird time signatures. And so I went back and they have a song called Friday the 13th 8 on the first release. So I went back and listened to that, and I was like, oh my God, like these guys are onto something else. And, the new record, Nothing to Be Scoffed At from Mutoid Man, they're doing great things too. The guy can't miss.
I just thought it was incredible, like how he was saying, like, like Mutoid Man started as like a 2-piece, and then Nick was doing the sound work.
Yeah.
And was like, hey, if you guys need a bass player, I'm like, holy shit. Just stumble ass backwards into like the best band ever. Like it's unreal.
Remember Steve said he thought that Nick was a cellist?
Yes.
And they're like, okay, I guess we'll have a cellist in the band.
I think he can do upright bass on some of these parts, I guess.
Oh, that was so good. But yeah, really stoked to have Steve on the show. And look, we didn't even get to talk about like 2 Minutes to Late Night, being in Quicksand, like everything else he's up to. So maybe at a later time.
Yeah.
But really stoked to have Steve on the show. Been waiting for that one for a long time. So thank you so much, Steve, for coming on the show. Now, Tommy, we have to talk about something very important.
Okay.
Us. How are we doing? Now, first, all right, so first I have some very important questions for you, okay?
Yes.
All right, and when we last left off, we had you back on the show and we were talking about our lives post you being on the show, and you said you stopped listening to the music for a while because it was too painful and there was too much association with the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so have you since gotten over that? Have you eased back into the world of this music?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's great to hear.
The super heavy stuff, I'm pretty decent with. I will say this: I still have not listened to Caspian or Hammock.
Oh,
that brings up some stuff where I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, I get mad.
it's like we're ex-lovers. Like you
Yeah.
can't listen to my bands. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, I really do, and I think I especially with Caspian, I had so much fun with Philip talking to him.
Yes.
And I remember the kind of buzz I had, like almost like I had like a couple shots. Like I was like, when we were done that interview, I was like, oh my God, like that was incredible. Like that guy was fucking phenomenal. He told crazy stories. He was relatable. He was funny. He was engaging. He talked about the recording like it was just everything I wanted from talking to musicians. And I'm like, and I'm doing this from my basement.
Yeah, in the early days when we would reach out to bands and they would actually say yes and come on the show, that was like the biggest high.
It really did. It made my week. Like I would literally the whole week, people at work would be like, "Hey, you seem extra happy." I'm like, I can't explain to you who I talk to or how I talk to them. However, just know that it was really fun and I had a great time.
Okay, next question.
Yeah.
You really weren't listening to the show too much post leaving, right? Because again, too many painful memories. Are you listening to the show more now?
I listened to the Cave-In episode. I listened to the Converge episode. I haven't really caught up on a bunch of stuff. I'm that's pretty much where I'm at.
What is it like listening to the show now? Is it still weird?
No, absolutely not. No, it's like listening to a regular podcast. it's really nice. I'm like, oh, this is fun. Like I'm listening to somebody talk about music. This is great. Like it's engaging and I think one of the big things I took away from stepping back from the show was like, there's not the pressure of being here on time, having things to talk about, researching the bands. Like it's another thing I don't have to worry about when I have a lot of things to worry about normally.
Yep.
At home. Like
Yep.
just with like little things like, we got a new refrigerator, like, like that's, hooking up the water lines to the fridge. Like, all right, shit, now I got to fucking learn plumbing. Like, and I have to like look up, some band and like listen to like all their, like at least be somewhat familiar with their catalog. That I think is huge for me. But I think especially with just listening to podcasts in general, I feel like it goes so, I hate to say this, it goes well without me. It doesn't, I don't think I added or detracted anything from the show.
No,
I was
no.
neutral.
Don't say you didn't add anything because that's not true.
I was, I'm what's midway between acid and base. So I'm 0 pH.
See, that's what you add. That's a very Tommy joke right there. And that's, I don't do as much funny stuff anymore because it would be weird to do it by myself. Like when I had you here, that would be the dynamic. Like I would like throw something against the wall and then you would react to it. But when there's no one here to react to it, it's, but listen, Tommy, I have some listener submitted questions here. The listeners are very curious about what you are up to. So here we go. Number one, Tommy, do you still buy all of your clothing at Costco?
Pants, yes. I buy all my pants, all my khakis and like dress pants come from Costco. I buy most of my t-shirts from eBay. I like that canvas tri-blend ones. I buy those a lot. But yeah, the vast majority of my clothing comes from it is Kirkland brand or they sell it at Costco.
The next listener submitted question, I think, has already answered itself. Are you still constantly trying to find ways to save money?
Yeah.
And it sounds like yes.
Yes. Here's one thing I have not saved money on. Kelly bought a new car.
Yes.
And I was not happy.
Why?
Because we paid over what you should pay for a new car. You never buy a new car. You don't buy new cars. That's what you do. You don't buy new cars. You drive it off the lot. It's worth 30% less than what you paid for it.
Yeah, but in true Tommy fashion, wouldn't you have bought some jank used car and then, it doesn't work and then
100%.
she gets mad at you and makes you have to return it and then we're delayed weeks because you bought the microphone from some store we never heard of and I just told you to buy it from Best Buy and then we had to wait for it to come back. And, oh, wait, I'm mixing up stories. Well, you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, no, that's the only thing that I've actually caught myself being like, you know what? I don't care. Actually, let me rephrase that. I let Kelly pick out the refrigerator that she wanted.
Yes.
And I didn't care about cost.
Yeah.
However, it was purchased from Costco.
So basically, as long as everything is purchased from Costco, that you are okay with.
Yeah.
Because you're getting a deal.
I know that they have the low price guarantee, and if I don't like it, I can just take it back to the store and it's done.
See, look, you're back, and we're just right back onto Costco. There's no
100%.
There's no getting away from it. But Tommy, people ask about you. I was with my friend and his wife, and she listened to the show when we were both still doing it, and she was asking about you and she was talking about Costco and everything. It was very pleasantly surprised. People ask me sometimes, Tommy, they're like, what happened? Why did Tommy leave? Because they think there's maybe something more to the story that we told on the air, and there's not. No. I just say, we got into a fight. The fight led to the discussion with your wife.
Yeah.
You realized the show was taking up too much time, and you had to leave. That's it.
Yeah. No, that's 100% it. It was, my thing is my wife and I we're so kind of nonchalant with each other, because we've known each other for so long. We've been around each other for so long. We do so much for each other that I kept going all right, I'm going downstairs. And I kept thinking all right, well, that's okay. And it really wasn't.
Yeah.
And then finally, after you and I had this kind of fight, I was talking to Kelly about it and she was like, yeah, I don't like it either because this, and I was like, oh shit, this is not cool because I don't have many things that are consistent in my life, but Kelly is one of those things that is she is unbelievably consistent. And when she was like, yeah, this is an issue for me and here's the reasons why. And I'm like, well, why didn't you say anything? She's like, because you love it so much. You legitimately, when you talk about the show, you're excited. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't have fun things in my life anymore. What do I do about this? And she's like, well, you can keep doing it, but just know that from this point forward, it has to be extraordinarily regimented. It has to be this. And I'm like, yeah, the show can't be that. You're dealing with musicians that have time frames, internet goes out, microphone issues, whatever it is, this isn't consistent. And she's like, well, then we can't do this. I'm like, okay. And her emphasis on the pronoun of we can't do this, I was like, yeah, all right, this isn't sustainable.
Yeah, it takes up a lot of time, especially now. I look fondly, what time I look fondly back on, even though it was a very, very difficult year of my life, 2021, right? Okay. We had the show down, we had our groove down, we were getting good guests, we just did one a week, every week, right? Sometimes we did multiple interviews during the week, but it was week to week.
Yeah.
We would work on that week's show, and then we would go to the next week and we'd be working on that show. And all I wanted to do was get the show done by Wednesday night and get it out the door to Richie to mix and then just play Call of Duty all night with my friends, with my Call of Duty friends that I used to have. And wow, things seemed so much simpler back then.
Yeah, so you're way ahead now, right?
There's a lot more to do. There's recording bursts, right? So I'll do multiple in a week for a whole month, but now there's advertisers and there's a lot more business associated with the show. So it takes up a lot more time, but this is what I do. This is all I do. But this is what I want to be doing. So again, we know this already, but understandable that you couldn't do it because you have 3 young kids. And that's exactly what I tell people because they ask and I'm like, he's got 3 young kids and 6 to 9 p.m. is prime kid time. So he can't be in the basement
Yeah.
multiple times a week for all that time.
Yeah, that was a big bummer, was like coming upstairs at night and Kelly being like, oh my God, the baby did X or the baby did Y. And I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, I miss that. I miss the whole thing. Or, the girls needed help with their math homework. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she's like, I left it out on the counter for you. Can you like look at it and help them in the morning? I'm like, yeah, I can. Like, I'm sorry. And she's like, no, it's okay. And that's Kelly's refrain for pretty much everything is, no, it's okay. And it's like, it's not. And apparently it wasn't. Like, we had like a full on like screaming match at like, 7:00 at night on a Thursday. I'm like, fuck, this is not the way I envisioned this happening. And this is causing so much strife. And like, people are right to ask. Like, I was on the show for, would you say 111 episodes?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, where did I go? And I think that's part of it is like, I didn't go anywhere. I can't allocate enough time in the day to be here to do this. And I'm sorry that I can't do that. And I do miss it profoundly because, the older you get, the more you realize you don't have a ton of friends. Like, I don't have friends. Like, I have you and, people I talk to online and stuff like that. And like, I don't get to converse with adults outside of, me talking with my wife before we go to bed. Like, that's pretty much the extent of my adult conversation. So this was a cool outlet for that. And I miss it dearly, but I will say it has gotten significantly easier to manage the night, especially now. Like, my wife and I kind of sat down and had like let's make a schedule of you do this, I do this, let's take her upstairs at this time, brush her teeth at this time, read stories at this time. So she's in bed because she has to get up when Kelly gets up, because they all go to school at the same time. My daughters go to the same school my wife teaches at. So it's like, you're getting a 3-year-old or 2-year-old up at 6:45 in the morning. It's not an easy task. And by 6:45 for me, I'm walking into work. Like, I teach middle school, so I'm walking in the building at 6:45. So it was like I was putting a lot of undue pressure on her, and I felt terrible about it afterwards. But at the same time, I really do miss doing this, especially now that I'm doing it right now.
Well, there's two things to remind yourself of. Number one, you're on the first 111 episodes, and you still come back once a year. We're doing an annual thing, everybody. Tommy's going to come back right before he goes back to school so we can reconnect with each other and with you, our listeners, and our history.
I'll do a Christmas break one too, if you want.
All right, we're gonna talk about that. I'll loop in my people and you'll loop in yours, and we'll figure it out. But number two, Tommy, this show would not exist without you because I wouldn't have been able to do it by myself. I'm like too nerve-wracked. I'm too neurotic. I almost wanted to just give up and not do it the night before when I was setting up everything in that hotel room when we were getting it ready. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know anything about audio. No one's going to listen to this. Like, so, having you there made me able to do this, and we did it together.
Aww.
And we did it greatly together. And you know what I think of? Saturday Night Live. Jimmy Fallon was a rising star, and Lorne Michaels wanted him to do the news by himself. And he said, I can't do it by myself. I'm too scared. I want Tina Fey to do it with me. If she does it with me, I'll do it. So Lorne said yes, and they did the news together. It was the first time they ever had two people do the news. So you're my Tina Fey, Tommy. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you.
I love that. I also love Tina Fey, so we're good.
There you go. There you go. So I wanted you to know that, and just in case you didn't.
No, I really appreciate that because for me, like, this was always like, I want to talk about music. This is fun. I love sitting down and just talking shit about music and telling old stories and stuff like that. Like, so this was such a natural fit for everything that we wanted to do, and being able to bring in bands that we loved and, people that we were friends with. It was just such a great culmination of just everything I loved about hardcore, and just it made me happy to talk about playing music. And I think that was the big thing for me, was like, you took it very seriously, almost like a journalist. Like you would have, pages of questions and all that. I had a notepad with like 10 things jotted down. I was like, okay, I hope they talk about skateboarding.
I hope they talk about skateboarding or teaching. Yeah. And if they don't, well, we're screwed. No, people are still listening from the beginning. Shout out to Intent Accident. That's a band who I was talking to, and someone from that band is going back and listening to every episode. Can you believe it, Tommy?
I can't. It's still like I get once in a while people on Spotify will like somehow find me through like Facebook or Instagram, and they'll be like, "Hey, I listened to your stuff on Spotify from Audience of One," and I'm like, "Cool." All right. I made that when I was 16. I don't remember that. Like, I don't remember doing any of that. Thank you.
Well, you have the legacy of the show to add to that as well, because, when we started this thing, we weren't active in music at the time. I tried to do the Basement Year. That didn't work out. So this was like a good musical outlet for me. And you hadn't played for a while either. So it was a good musical outlet for you. And, we got to talk to people we looked up to all the time. And that's rare. So it was just a good situation all around.
I have questions for you.
Oh, please.
How is playing live with the Darling Fire?
Unbelievably terrifying.
Okay.
I'm actually back on anxiety medication to help with that.
Really?
Yeah, non-narcotic, not anything heavy, because I can't be near anything like that. But I have something to help me with stage fright. And because I found it hard to function even. Like, it was like, I wasn't having panic attacks or anything, but it was like really rough. So I wanted some help with that. And these songs are not easy to play.
No, they're not. Honestly, that's one of those things I started listening to. You were like, I might join the Darling Fire. And I was like, cool.
Yeah.
And I listened to it and I was like, oh shit. Like this is not like, let's just follow root note stuff. Like, this is hard. Like, there's a lot of stuff.
I didn't realize it when I was listening to Rituals, for the first time, those times, but it can be pretty proggy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Let's just put it this way. Many bass players don't go past the 9th fret.
Yeah.
There's a handful of things that I heard and I went, oh shit. Like, this is a timing issue. There's a lot of things that go into playing like that. And I applaud you, because I know that, like, if someone told me that right now and said, hey, you want to learn an entire band's catalog? I'd be like, no, I don't care how much I want to be on stage. Like, I don't want that nervous anxiety. Like, it would be, I don't know if you have these. Do you have like reoccurring thoughts that are just consuming
every minute of every day?
All right. Phenomenal. So it's that, like, I would literally go to bed thinking about it and wake up in the morning remembering dreams I had about messing up. Like, that's all I would do.
Yeah, that was my life for 2 months while I learned these songs, and it was all consuming. And you know what? Now that I would always ask bands that we had on, like, how did you learn the songs? What did you do? Because I think deep down, I knew I was going to maybe do that someday if I joined a band.
Well, I will see you August 20th at the...
Oh yeah, that was the other important question I had. Will you be coming to the Darling Fire Philadelphia gig on August 20th?
I already put a calendar invite to Kelly. She knows I'm unavailable at starting. And that's one of those shows. It starts early and ends. It starts early and ends early.
It's over by 7:30. It's perfect.
It's perfect for me. Like, absolutely perfect. Like, I can literally go to that and then go hang out with Doug for an hour and then go home. Like, that's going to be, like, to me, I'm like, this is phenomenal. Like, that's a great opportunity for me to go hang out with you.
Yes. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be good. Well, listen, everybody. That's it. We're out of time. Tommy, do you have any important and inspiring and inspirational closing words for the people before we leave?
You know what I did that was really difficult? And it was one of those things that I had... So here's the premise of it. don't give up on something because you think it's too difficult. So I got a new guitar about a year ago. I've been listening to music in my car every day on the way home from school. I typically listen to podcasts on the way in. So on the way home, I was just kind of like scrolling through music, and I hit an old Cryptopsy song that I loved from, I think it's from None So Vile. It's called Phobophile. And I was like, I'm going to learn this song. I downloaded that thing on my computer or on my phone, that Songster that has all the tab and you can slow it down. It took me from when was the last day of school? June 16th until about a week ago. So July 27th, I'm up to measure 90 in the song. And it's a difficult song. Like, it really took me a long time to get a lot of the fingering down. There's a lot of chromatic parts that I'm not familiar with that took me just like, all right, well, I don't know how to do this, so I have to sit down and practice scales. So if something seems difficult from the onset, don't just give up because you think you don't have the ability to do it. Persevere. Like, you might really surprise yourself. There was times where I got through 3-4 measures a night and I was like, shit, like, this is really good. Like, I'm making progress. You can actually surprise yourself if you really do set the time out. Takes 5-6 weeks of just, I'm going to focus on this and do it. Just because you think you can't do it doesn't mean you can't. Like, sit down and put the work in, and you will surprise yourself most of the time. Don't be like, I'm going to, learn differential equations tonight. Like,
don't do that at all.
Yeah, don't do it. No, do it, but don't do it and set a reasonable time limit.
Persistence pays. But listen, that's it. That's all the time we have. We're out of time. I'm back next week with another landmark guest. Now, Tommy, this is another person I've been waiting to have on the show since we started the show. And they put out a record that's probably the most important record of my lifetime. We're going to leave it right there. So that's it. So I'm going to end the show. We're going to do a double dip, right? A rare double dip because we had Stephen Brodsky on the show. I'm going to end the show with Luminance by Caven. I'm back next week with a new episode and a new guest. So thanks everybody for listening. And until next time. It's so weird to think about some of this music and those times. Like, I can listen to a record and be right back in that time and have that feeling. And it just feels like a lifetime ago.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah. That's all you got, man? Come on.
I'm sorry.
Keep going.
I'm coughing. I actually hit mute like at the right time, and then he started talking to me again.
I was so thrown. You're like, it does. And I'm waiting for you to say more, and I'm like, oh my God, something's wrong.
I took a sip of water, and it went down the wrong, wrong pipe. Oh my word!
Give yourself a second.
Yeah.